So you describe your home as London, and which is overlooking the Waterloo station.
Yes.
And that's something that you call as your secret spot.
Well, secret in the sense that I made it a secret spot. I mean, the fact that it's interesting because when after arriving in London as a student and then staying in another part of town for about 10 years, I had already made up my mind that I would make London home. But it didn't feel right, to extend, that period and the area of where, being a student and how you experience a student. So it was a new chapter for me. So it was interesting because it was the place where nobody wanted to live in. And I love that idea of being somewhere so central with so much activity. I overlook the rail tracks from the back window, and it's so nice to see people sort of moving, volumes of people in and out of the place. So it's great because you can walk everywhere from there.
So that brings me to the question that how does your role as a hidden observer translate into your work?
It's a tricky question because I guess it goes back to as a creative is what makes you create. And I think as creatives we all have to kind of have one tool is really how we respond to information through things that we see. And I think is a filter that you try to apply, and how that information gets translated and then eventually comes out as something you create, or you build up from scratch. So it's this is really the process at the end of the day.
It's also really intriguing because as observers of your design and your work, we feel your work is most really calming. It's very clean lines. It's got an element of surprise because of the way that things come together, and the whole composition is balanced. But I was also thinking that you overlook these tracks and this busy, buzzing, London. That's like your stimuli. So this transition from something that is so buzzy in terms of a stimuli and your response that comes out in terms of such calming products, how does that happen?
Well, it's almost like building a castle, and you have to protect yourself in any environment. I love living in a city, and I love living in a buzzing city with all its minuses, with all its pluses. You have to embrace the city for what it is. And so when I first moved in that area, I couldn't imagine myself living anywhere else that was less busy and wanting something kind of very tranquil. But at the same time, I had to kind of establish myself and build my environment and protect myself from this, or allow certain filters to come in. And in that sense, then, created my own boundaries and created and established my tranquility and in that space that I chose to build from scratch.
And also because we're talking about being at home and creating these filters, and in a way the pandemic, the last 2 years that we have gone through, I mean, a lot of us had to recede in a way into our own spaces. So do you feel the last 2 years in any way have changed your work and your life?
I think I can only speak for myself as a designer, and my practice is what I miss most was the fact that I all of a sudden is really the absence of physical contact with people. And you cannot speak as a designer and designing and developing products when you can't actually touch, feel, see, respond to all these things. So it's really something I missed greatly during the time. So I'm very happy that that element is starting to kind of come back.
And especially this year's Salone theme is also sustainability.
Yeah.
And even though I think sustainability has been a buzzword for a few decades now, but a lot of times it has not really been practiced in the truest sense. But with all the environmental, issues, the crisis that is really more urgent than ever. And I was just thinking about your association with Kettal as a brand, and Kettal has its expertise in aluminium as a material, and with sustainability as a tool, as a theme. How do you what's your association like?
I think it's more, it's not about the material as such, like looking at the, it's about the responsibility that we have as designers to create things that last. I think for me, this is what is the most mature approach to sustainability. The idea of encouraging a consumer society on the level that you can actually need to constantly change something that you bought or renew or whatever. I think that quality of passing things from one generation to another generation is really the ultimate approach to sustainability. Because if you just, start, of course, the manufacturing process is very, very important part of it, not to damage the environment through that process. But once you create something and you spend so much time, resources, everything to make it, then it's your responsibility as a designer that this product has longevity. It's interesting, we are even companies that think they address sustainability, or even governments that think they have the right schemes on board to encourage all these different schemes about recycling. How many products are actually recycled? Not many, and this is the big problem. So the idea is that why recycle something? Why talk about recyclability when you don't really need to get rid of something?
I think it's really interesting, especially what you're saying about things being passed on from generation to generation. I think it in a way reflects upon the fact that we need to probably slow down in terms of not just our lives, but also in the design industry. I mean, year after year, there's so much pressure to do new, to create new collection, because the audiences are probably getting bored much faster. And so I'm sure the brands feel the pressure, and hence the designers feel the pressure to keep creating something new all the time. And so while we are living in a day and age where time seems to be accelerating all the time, but we also have realized in the last 2 years especially that to really find meaning, we need to slow down. And I think that slowness in design is something that could be achieved through what you just said about longevity.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's spot on. We need to take a step back.
So if I have to ask you, if you had the power to stop one thing from happening next, what would that be?
I think it's the way that the young generation's attention span is become so limited that that level that they're constantly striving for excitement, to get them excited about the next thing and the next thing, and it becomes a very, very worrying thing, like to see that this is actually the future, this is actually how people will think, and unfortunately society is not, and media and everything is not really pulling people away from it. It's actually feeding them with the ingredients that is only going to escalate that. So this is something that is of high concern to me.
So since we're talking about next, could you tell us a little bit about your new collection with Kettal, because that is your and Kettal's next in terms of your collaboration?
Well, it's as you can see, there's obviously the chair that was launched originally last year, but without really an official, let's say, launch, but more as a product was made available on the market, and that was my first collaboration with Kettal. And then the fan, but the fan, and it's interesting because it's a product with a message, it's in a sense of a message of something meaningful, like that I always wanted to create. Perhaps there are certain cultures that are more familiar with that type of objects other than others. But the idea that you present this in such an environment where the message of global warming, perhaps that the planet is getting warmer. Why do we need AC? Maybe we should look at other ways of keeping ourselves cool, but it's more about a reminder of what is happening to the world rather than anything else. So it's nice that a company like Kettal was so open about that brief that I set to myself to explore and embrace that idea of developing a product of that nature, which is very unusual for a furniture company to say, okay, why not a fan? Yes, a fan. It fits with everything they do about the outdoor pavilions that they make, the sense of indoor, outdoor, the open air situation. So.